My billionaire wife locked me out of our house all night because I put a 3-inch scratch on her male assistant's Porsche. By sunrise, I had withdrawn my company from the $800 million deal that was supposed to secure her empire's next decade. I did not cancel it because I was angry about sleeping outside. I canceled it because that night finally proved something I had spent years refusing to admit. My wife no longer saw me as her partner. She saw me as an asset she could discipline until I behaved. My name is Marcus Bell. My wife, Helena Bell, was the founder and CEO of Aurelian Industrial Group, a Denver-based manufacturing conglomerate with interests in aerospace components, advanced ceramics, and high-temperature energy systems. Forbes estimated her personal net worth at $2.6 billion. People like to call her self-made. That was mostly true. Helena inherited nothing except a small machining business from her father and turned it into a public company with more than 12,000 employees. She was brilliant, aggressive, relentless. And for the first 10 years I knew her, she was also the woman who came home after midnight, kicked off $6,000 heels in the kitchen, and ate reheated noodles with me from the same bowl. I loved that woman. The problem was that success slowly taught Helena a dangerous lesson. When she pushed hard enough, most people eventually gave her what she wanted. Employees, vendors, bankers, board members, regulators sometimes. Eventually, she started expecting the same thing from me. I was never financially dependent on Helena. Before we married, I founded Bell Thermal Systems, a privately held engineering company specializing in ceramic heat shields and thermal management assemblies for aerospace turbines and industrial hydrogen systems. Helena did not own it. Aurelian did not own it. Our prenuptial agreement made that explicit. For years, the separation worked. Aurelian occasionally bought components from Bell Thermal at market rates. I occasionally advised Helena on manufacturing. We were spouses at home and separate business owners at work. Then Aurelian began preparing its largest acquisition ever. The target was a European industrial energy company called Volaris Systems. The total transaction value was approximately $3.4 billion. But the acquisition only made financial sense if Aurelian could guarantee access to a new generation of high-temperature ceramic modules. Bell Thermal owned the patents. That was where my company came in. 8 months earlier, Aurelian and Bell Thermal signed a non-binding letter of intent for an $800 million strategic transaction. Aurelian would acquire 60% of Bell Thermal's industrial division while I retained the aerospace business and significant licensing rights. The board loved it. Banks loved it. Volaris's sellers loved it. The transaction was not final. That mattered. We had completed diligence, negotiated most commercial terms, and scheduled definitive agreements for the following week. But until those agreements were signed, either party could withdraw. The LOI said so in plain English. Helena knew that. Her assistant apparently did not. His name was Lucas Dane. 31. Expensive suits. Perfect hair. The kind of smile that looked practiced in front of a mirror. Officially, he was Helena's executive assistant. Unofficially, he had started behaving like the gatekeeper to her entire life. He answered calls that used to come directly to her. He decided which dinners she attended. He sat in meetings involving acquisitions, legal strategy, even board preparation. And over the previous 6 months, Helena had begun defending him with a level of intensity one found increasingly strange. He makes me more efficient. He understands what I need before I ask. He protects my time. Every criticism of Lucas became, somehow, criticism of Helena. I noticed. I also ignored more than I should have. The night everything broke began with a charity dinner at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Helena attended as keynote sponsor. I drove separately because I had spent the afternoon at Bell Thermal's test facility. Lucas arrived in a new Porsche 911 Turbo S, bright silver. He had bought it 3 days earlier. Everyone knew because he had managed to mention the car in almost every conversation. After the dinner, the valet line was jammed. I retrieved my own Range Rover from a side lot and started backing out. Lucas's Porsche had been parked illegally behind a painted boundary, partly blocking the turn. I stopped. Adjusted. Tried again. My rear bumper barely touched the Porsche's front quarter panel. No crash. No dent. Just a light scrape. I got out immediately. There was a narrow scratch, maybe 3 inches long. Annoying. Reparable. I photographed it, called Lucas, and told him exactly what happened. "I'll pay for the repair," I said. He stared at the scratch like I had keyed his car intentionally. "This was brand new." "I know. Do you have any idea what this paint costs?" "No, Lucas. That is why insurance companies exist." Helena came over. "What happened?" Lucas answered before I could. "Marcus hit my car. I scraped it while backing out." Helena looked at the Porsche. Then at me. "Were you drinking?" "No, you had wine. 1 glass 3 hours ago." Lucas folded his arms. "I told the valet not to let anyone near it." I looked at him. "You parked over the line." His expression changed. "So now it's my fault?" "No. I hit it. I already said I'll pay. That should have ended it." Instead, Helena said, "Marcus, apologize." I stared at her. "I just did." "No. You explained." "I said I was sorry when I called him." Lucas shrugged. It didn't sound sincere. I almost laughed. "What exactly would satisfy you?" Helena's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this worse. I am offering to repair a scratch." "You're being dismissive." "Because it is a scratch." Lucas said quietly, "Some people respect things more when they actually worked for them." That did it. I looked at him. "Excuse me?" He immediately adopted an innocent expression. "I didn't mean anything." "You absolutely did." Helena stepped between us. "Enough." Then, to me, "Go home." I thought she meant the argument was over. I was wrong. When I reached our house in Cherry Creek 15 minutes later, the driveway gate would not open. My access code failed. I tried the app. My profile had been disabled. I called Helena. No answer. I called again. She declined. Then a text appeared. "You need to cool off tonight. Stay somewhere else." I stared at the screen. I called immediately. This time she answered. "You disabled my access? For tonight? To my own house? You are not coming inside while you're this angry." "I'm not angry. You nearly started a fight with Lucas. He insulted me. You damaged his car and then mocked him for caring. I offered to pay for it. That isn't the point." "Then what is the point?" Her voice turned cold. "The point is that you think because you have money, you never have to consider how your behavior affects anyone." I almost did not believe what I was hearing. "You locked your husband out of his home over your assistant's Porsche. I asked you to stay somewhere else for one night. You disabled my gate access. Because you would have ignored me." That sentence mattered. She had not asked. She had made compliance the only option. "Turn it back on." "No, Helena. Not tonight." Then she added the sentence that ended more than she understood. "Maybe sleeping somewhere inconvenient will remind you that actions have consequences." The line went dead. I sat in my car outside the house for several minutes. The guest house lights were on. The main house was dark. My clothes were inside. My medication was inside. My laptop bag was with me, but my overnight things were not. I could have gone to a hotel. I had enough money to buy the hotel. That was never the issue. The issue was that Helena had used a home we jointly owned as a punishment mechanism because I had offended a man who worked for her. I tried the pedestrian gate once. Disabled. Then I noticed Lucas's Porsche coming down the street. He pulled into my driveway. The gate opened for him. I sat there watching. Lucas drove into my home while my own credentials were disabled. That was the moment the scratch stopped mattering. I called Helena again. She answered after 4 rings. "Why is Lucas at the house?" "He's dropping off documents." "At 11:30? We have the Volaris financing call early tomorrow. He has access and I don't." "For tonight, yes." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the alternative was shouting. "Do you hear yourself? You're making this dramatic." "No. I'm finally hearing it clearly." She sighed. "Marcus, get a hotel. We'll talk tomorrow." "No, what does that mean?" "It means we'll talk tomorrow." I ended the call. Then I drove away. Not to a hotel. To Bell Thermal headquarters. Our night security guard looked surprised when I walked in at midnight carrying my dinner jacket over one arm. Late night? Something like that. I went upstairs to my office. At 12:17 a.m., I opened the Aurelian transaction file. The 800 million deal sat there. 217 pages of draft purchase agreements. Patent schedules. Licensing provisions. Transition services. Board approvals. Financing commitments. Almost complete. Almost. The definitive agreement had not been signed. Under Section 7 of the LOI, either party could terminate negotiations at any time before execution without liability except for confidentiality and specified diligence costs. I had negotiated that clause personally. At the time, Helena called it unnecessary. "We're married," she had said. "Neither of us is walking away." I insisted anyway. Not because I expected divorce. Because a company should never depend on a marriage surviving. At 12:41, I called Bell Thermal's general counsel, Rebecca Sloan. She answered with the exhausted voice of someone who had learned long ago that founders only call after midnight when something is wrong. "Marcus? I need you to review termination rights under the Aurelian LOI." Silence. Then, "Why?" "Because I'm considering withdrawing." "From the entire transaction?" "Yes." "Is this related to Helena?" "The reason I'm reviewing it is personal. The decision will be corporate." Rebecca became fully awake. "Then we need to separate those things carefully." "I know." Bell Thermal's board approved the proposed transaction because Aurelian offered strategic value. What changed from the company's perspective? That was the correct question. Not whether my wife embarrassed me. Whether the deal remained good for Bell Thermal. I opened another folder. 3 weeks earlier, our internal risk committee had flagged concerns about Aurelian demanding broader access to our patent portfolio than the original LOI contemplated. Lucas had been pushing those changes through Helena's office. 2 draft provisions would allow Aurelian engineers to develop adjacent ceramic technologies using our know-how. I had rejected them. They returned in the next draft with different language. Then again. That had bothered me. Now I wondered why Lucas cared so much about technical rights he barely understood. "Pull every revision from Aurelian over the last 60 days, I told Rebecca. "Looking for expansion of IP rights, governance changes, anything originating from the CEO office. I'll bring in transaction counsel." "Do that." At 1:30, our CFO joined by video. At 2:10, outside counsel joined. At 3:05, we had our answer. The deal had shifted. Quietly. Not enough to be obvious in any single draft. But across 5 revisions, Aurelian had expanded proposed control over Bell Thermal's patents, limited my veto rights over industrial licensing, and inserted language that could prevent my aerospace business from competing in certain adjacent thermal markets. Who requested the changes? Lucas Dane. Not directly. His office. Each request carried the notation, CEO priority. Rebecca looked at me through the screen. "Did Helena authorize these?" "I don't know." "Then do not assume." "I won't." Our CFO asked, "If we withdraw, what happens?" "Bell Thermal remains independent." "And Volaris?" "That is Aurelian's problem." "Financial impact to us?" "We lose the $800 million transaction consideration." He nodded slowly. "But we keep the division. And the patents. And our future licensing upside." "Yes." He leaned back. I was already uncomfortable with the later drafts. So was I. At 4:12 a.m., I formally requested an emergency Bell Thermal board meeting for 7. At 5 o'clock, I showered in the executive gym. At 5:30, I changed into clothes from an emergency travel bag I kept in my office. At 6:05, Helena finally called. "Where are you?" "At work." "You stayed there all night?" "Yes." Her voice softened slightly. "You could have gone to the Four Seasons." "I know." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I had work to do." "What work?" "The Aurelian transaction." A pause. "What about it?" "We found issues." "What issues?" "I'll send them through counsel." Her tone changed instantly. "Marcus, don't mix last night with the deal." "I'm not." "You're angry." "Yes." "So wait before doing anything stupid." "I have never made an $800 million decision without board review." She became quiet. "What are you doing?" "Reviewing whether Bell Thermal should proceed." "You already agreed." "To a non-binding LOI. The Volaris acquisition depends on that transaction." "I know." "Our banks depend on it." "I know." "Marcus." For the first time, I heard fear in her voice. "You cannot pull this because I locked you out for one night." "I'm not." "Then why now?" "Because last night made me look harder at why your office keeps trying to expand control over my company." Silence. "Then, Lucas handles document coordination." I noticed. "He isn't negotiating the deal." His office submitted 5 material changes to our IP rights. That doesn't mean he wrote them. Then we'll find out. Her breathing changed. Do not cancel anything until I get there. You're not on Bell Thermal's board. I'm your wife. The same structure again. Different context. Same expectation. I answered calmly. And Bell Thermal is still my company. At 7 a.m., my board convened. By 8:26, after reviewing the changed economics and governance terms, the directors voted 6-1 to terminate negotiations with Aurelian. I abstained because of my marriage. That detail mattered. The board made the decision. Not the angry husband sleeping outside. At 8:41, Rebecca sent formal notice terminating the $800 million transaction under the LOI. At 8:49, Aurelian's general counsel acknowledged receipt. At 9:03, Helena called me 12 times. I did not answer. At 9:17, Aurelian postponed its Volaris financing call. At 9:32, 2 banks requested updated acquisition assumptions. At 10:05, the Volaris sellers demanded confirmation that Aurelian still had access to the thermal technology underlying its integration projections. It did not. By 10:40, Aurelian's board scheduled an emergency meeting. And at 11:02, Rebecca sent me the first document from our overnight forensic review. An email from Lucas to Helena. Sent 4 days earlier. Once Bell Thermal closes, Marcus loses the only business reason anyone still treats him as independent from you. After that, he'll calm down. Helena replied, just get the deal signed. I'll handle Marcus. I read it twice. The scratch on the Porsche had never been the real problem. Neither was one night outside. The problem was that my billionaire wife had started believing everything in my life could eventually be folded into hers. My company. My patents. My home. My choices. Even my right to say no. She locked me out to teach me that actions had consequences. By sunrise, she was about to learn the same lesson. Aurelian's emergency board meeting began at 11:30 that morning. I was not invited initially. That changed after Bell Thermal's termination notice included the revision history showing that 5 material changes to our patent and governance provisions had originated from Helena's executive office. At 11:12, Aurelian's general counsel called Rebecca. At 11:18, Rebecca called me. They want you available. For what? To explain why Bell Thermal withdrew. They have the board resolution. They want context. Corporate context only. Agreed. I joined by video from Bell Thermal's headquarters. Helena sat at the center of Aurelian's boardroom. Lucas sat behind her. That irritated me more than it should have. The man whose Porsche had somehow become important enough to lock me out of my own house was now sitting inside an $800 million governance crisis that his office had helped create. Aurelian's board chair, Charles Whitmore, opened the meeting. Marcus, I want to begin with something simple. Did Bell Thermal terminate because of a personal dispute between you and Helena? No, Helena looked at me immediately. Charles continued. Did last night's incident influence your decision to review the deal? Yes. That answer surprised several directors. I had no reason to hide it. It made me question whether decisions involving my company were being treated as extensions of my marriage. That prompted review. The board terminated after reviewing material changes to the transaction. Would you have had authority to terminate alone? I had contractual withdrawal rights, but because of the conflict created by my marriage, I asked Bell Thermal's board to decide. Did you vote? I abstained. Charles looked toward Aurelian's general counsel. She nodded. We received the Bell Thermal board minutes. That is accurate. Helena folded her arms. So you triggered the review because you were angry. I looked at her. Yes. And now you want everyone to pretend this is unrelated. No, I kept my voice even. I want everyone to distinguish trigger from basis. Charles nodded slowly. That was the right distinction. Then Bell Thermal's outside transaction counsel shared a comparison of the deal drafts. The original LOI gave Aurelian access to specific industrial patent families. The later drafts expanded that access into adjacent derivative applications. The original governance structure gave me veto authority over licensing into aerospace-adjacent markets. The revised language narrowed that veto. The original non-compete applied only to the industrial business being sold. The newest draft could restrict Bell Thermal's remaining aerospace division from entering certain thermal management markets for 7 years. One director interrupted. 7 years? Yes, Rebecca said. Helena looked toward her general counsel. Why was I never told the restriction went that far? The attorney answered carefully. You were copied on the redline summaries. I don't read every redline. No, then who approved the business request? Silence. Everyone looked toward Lucas. He sat straighter. My office coordinated input from strategy and integration. Charles stared at him. You are an executive assistant. Lucas's expression tightened. My title expanded last quarter. I also manage strategic initiatives. That still does not make you transaction counsel. No, sir. Charles turned to Helena. Did you authorize Mr. Dane to negotiate economic or IP terms? He was authorized to coordinate. Coordinate what? Feedback. From whom? Helena looked toward Lucas. That was when I knew something was wrong. She did not know. Charles saw it too. Mr. Dane? Lucas answered. Integration leadership raised concerns that Bell Thermal would retain too much control after closing. Which integration leader? I'd have to check. Charles leaned forward. You requested 5 material contractual changes affecting an $800 million transaction, and you cannot tell this board whose concerns you were conveying? Lucas's jaw shifted. They were discussed across teams. Names. Silence. Helena finally spoke. Lucas. He looked at her. Who asked you to change the patent rights? He hesitated. I believe those changes were necessary. That sentence changed the room. Helena's face went still. You believed? I was acting in the company's interest. That is not what I asked. Lucas looked toward the lawyers. I'd prefer counsel present before answering questions about drafting responsibility. Aurelian's general counsel answered immediately. You have company counsel here. If you believe you need personal counsel, say so. Lucas said nothing. Charles ordered a 15-minute recess. Helena did not call me during it. For once, I think she understood the problem was larger than us. When the meeting resumed, Lucas's seat was empty. Aurelian had suspended his access pending forensic review. Then Charles asked Helena about the email Rebecca had found. He displayed it on the screen. Lucas, once Bell Thermal closes, Marcus loses the only business reason anyone still treats him as independent from you. After that, he'll calm down. Helena, just get the deal signed. I'll handle Marcus. Charles read the exchange aloud. What did handle Marcus mean? Helena looked at me, then away. I meant I would deal with the marital conflict separately. Did you believe closing the transaction would reduce Mr. Bell's independence? No, Charles waited. Helena exhaled. Not financially. What does that mean? She said nothing. I understood before she explained. Bell Thermal was the one thing in my professional life she could not influence through Aurelian. If Aurelian bought most of it, our worlds would merge. My company's value would become tied to hers. My largest remaining business asset would become subject to her board, her capital, her executives. Maybe she did not consciously call that control. But Lucas had. And Helena had not objected. Charles continued. Did you know Lucas was pushing broader rights than the LOI contemplated? I knew he wanted stronger integration. Did you direct him to obtain those rights? I told him I wanted fewer dependencies after closing. Dependencies on whom? Marcus. The room became very quiet. There it was. Not technical dependence. Not supplier risk. Me. Charles asked, was Mr. Bell failing to perform under existing agreements? No. Was Bell Thermal financially unstable? No. Was there any credible threat that he intended to withhold technology? No. Then why was dependence on him a problem? Helena's voice dropped. Because our marriage was getting worse. I almost looked away. She continued. I did not want Aurelian's future tied to whether Marcus and I stayed married. That sounded reasonable until Rebecca spoke. The structure already separated those issues. Bell Thermal's commercial obligations were contractual. Divorce would not have automatically terminated them. Helena nodded. I know that legally. Charles caught the wording. And emotionally? Helena stared at the table. I wanted fewer things he could walk away with. There it was. The same problem in its purest form. She did not want to lose me. So she tried to eliminate what would remain mine if I left. The board did not need to ask how healthy that was for a marriage. It needed to ask whether the CEO had allowed that fear to influence an $800 million transaction. Charles did. Did your personal concern about separation affect the deal terms you supported? Yes. No qualification. That answer probably saved her from looking worse later. It did not save the deal. Aurelian's CFO then presented the consequences. Without Bell Thermal's industrial division and patents, the Volaris acquisition still could proceed. But the economics changed dramatically. Aurelian would need an alternative thermal supplier. The best candidate was more expensive and lacked certification for 2 product lines included in the Volaris growth plan. Banks would require a revised financing model. Volaris's sellers could demand renegotiation under the material change provisions of their agreement. The acquisition was not dead. But the structure Helena had presented to investors no longer existed. One director asked me, would Bell Thermal reconsider? Not under the current transaction. What about a simple supply contract? That is possible. Helena looked up. You would still sell to Aurelian? If the terms are good. You cancelled $800 million and you'd still sell us components? Yes. She looked genuinely confused. Why? Because terminating a bad acquisition does not require destroying a customer. Charles almost smiled. Then he asked, what would make Bell Thermal willing to reopen acquisition talks? Nothing right now. Never? I didn't say never. What would have to change? Trust. That was not a contractual term. Everyone understood it anyway. At 1:22, the board ordered an independent investigation into the transaction revisions and Lucas's role. Helena retained her CEO title. For now. But the board imposed immediate controls. Any change to the Volaris transaction required audit committee approval. All negotiations with Bell Thermal moved out of the CEO office. Lucas's strategic project access remained suspended. And Helena could not approve any transaction involving my company without independent director review. She hated that last condition. I saw it in her face. But she voted for it. The meeting ended at 1:47. At 2:03, Helena called. I answered. Are you coming home? That was her first question. No, Marcus. You disabled my access. I restored it this morning. I know. Then come home. No, she breathed slowly. Where are you staying? An apartment Bell Thermal keeps for visiting executives. You're serious? Yes. Because of one night? No, you keep saying that. Because you keep reducing it to one night. She became quiet. I continued. You locked me out because you wanted to punish me. I wanted you to calm down. You gave Lucas access to our house while mine was disabled. He was dropping off documents. At midnight. We had a financing call. You could have had him deliver them to your office. Silence. Then, yes. That admission mattered. Why didn't you? I didn't think about how it looked. I think you did. What does that mean? You wanted me to know he could come in. Her breathing changed. That is not fair. Then tell me I'm wrong. She did not. After several seconds, she whispered, I was angry. So you used access to our home to show me whose side you were on. I didn't think of it like that. You disabled my gate code. I know. You told me actions have consequences. I know. You let the man whose car I scratched drive through the same gate. She started crying. I know. That was the first honest answer she gave about the night itself. Then I asked, did you know Lucas was changing my deal? I knew he wanted broader rights. That isn't what I asked. No, did you authorize him to write new patent language? No, did you tell him Aurelian needed less dependence on me? Yes. Did you tell him to keep pushing after I rejected the changes? Yes. There it was. Again. Not guilty of every detail. Still responsible for the direction. Helena said, I thought if Bell Thermal became part of Aurelian, we would stop fighting about whose company was whose. That is not a business reason. I know. Did you think it would help our marriage? Yes. How? She hesitated. We'd stop living like two people who could walk away independently. I stared at the wall. That was the point. What? Independence is supposed to make staying a choice. She cried harder. I didn't see it that way. No, I saw it as an exit door you kept unlocked. And instead of asking whether I wanted to leave, you tried to remove the door. Yes. The answer came barely above a whisper. I did not tell her I had already met with a divorce attorney. Not yet. First, I needed to know how far Lucas had gone. At 4:30, Rebecca called. The forensic review had found a private folder on Lucas's work drive. Title: Post-close integration. Inside were proposed personnel changes after Bell Thermal's industrial division joined Aurelian. My role was listed as Transitional Founder Advisor, 12 months maximum. Then, remove board observer rights after technology transfer. Then, consolidate patent decision-making under Aurelian CTO. None of those terms existed in our negotiated agreement. Aurelian's CTO had never requested them. Lucas had. But the most important file was not the org chart. It was an email to an outside recruiter. Need discrete candidates for Bell Thermal Integration President. Current founder likely exits after close. CEO wants clean operational authority. Rebecca asked, "Did Helena want you out after closing?" "I don't know." Then we ask. Before we could, another file surfaced. Lucas had sent Helena a draft presentation titled, "One Company, One Future." Page 17 proposed removing my operating authority 12 months after acquisition. Helena had commented on it. "Marcus won't accept this." Lucas answered, "He will after closing." "What alternative does he have?" Helena replied, "Do not show him this yet." I read the exchange twice. Not approval. Not rejection. Delay. Again. That was becoming her pattern. If I would say no, let me find out after the structure became harder to undo. Rebecca said, "Marcus? I'm here. Do you want this sent to Aurelian's board?" "Yes." "Anything else?" I thought about the locked gate. Lucas driving into my house. Helena telling me inconvenience would teach me consequences. Send the entire folder. At 5:18, Aurelian's audit committee received it. At 5:44, Charles called Helena back to headquarters. At 6:03, Lucas was placed on administrative leave. At 6:27, company security collected his laptop, badge, phone, and expense cards. At 7:10, the board suspended Helena's authority over personnel decisions connected to Bell Thermal Integration. She was still CEO. But the walls around her authority were closing. Not because I demanded it. Because each new file showed that she and Lucas had treated the unsigned transaction as if my consent were merely something to manage later. Then, at 8:02, Rebecca sent me one final email. Lucas had drafted a message he never sent. Recipient, Helena. Subject, after tonight. The draft read, "If Marcus keeps pushing back, stop treating him like an equal negotiator. Once Bell closes, he works inside your company. He'll learn the difference." No reply existed. Helena had never received it. That mattered. But the sentence still stayed with me. Because the previous night, after I scratched Lucas's Porsche, my wife had locked me outside and told me I needed to learn that actions had consequences. Lucas and Helena were not saying the same thing. Not yet. But they were beginning to think the same way. That was why I cancelled the deal. Not because I slept outside one night. Because I finally understood what signing it would have meant. I would not be selling 60% of a division. I would be placing the last independent part of my professional life inside an empire run by a wife who had started believing equality was something I needed to be trained out of. By Tuesday morning, Lucas Dane was no longer Helena's executive assistant. Aurelian had not fired him yet. The board wanted the forensic review finished first. But his access was gone. His badge was dead. His company phone sat in an evidence bag. His expense accounts were frozen. And for the first time since I scratched his Porsche, he had no way to walk into my home, my wife's office, or an 800 million transaction simply because Helena had decided he belonged there. That should have made me feel better. It did not. Because the board found something worse on his laptop. Lucas had been building a private compensation model around the Bell Thermal acquisition. Not for me. For himself. Rebecca called at 7:12 a.m., "You need to see this before Aurelian's board does." I thought they already had the whole folder. They have the integration materials. This was in a personal finance directory. She shared her screen. The file was called, Bell Integration Incentive Structure. My name appeared 4 times. Helena's appeared twice. Lucas's appeared 14. The first section proposed converting Bell Thermal's industrial division into a new Aurelian subsidiary after closing. That part was not unusual. The second section was. Lucas proposed giving himself a 2% integration performance award, tied to cost savings achieved during the first 18 months. 2% of what? Not salary. Not a bonus pool. 2% of the new subsidiary's equity value. On an $800 million deal, depending on post-close valuation, his award could have been worth more than $10 million. Was this board approved? I asked. No. Compensation committee? No. Did Helena see it? We're checking. Then Rebecca scrolled lower. The performance conditions were even more revealing. Lucas received maximum credit if three things happened. Bell thermal patent control moved fully under Aurelian. My board observer rights were eliminated. And I exited all operating responsibilities within 12 months. He had personally tied his financial upside to removing me. That explains the recruiter, I said. Possibly. Anything from Helena? Not yet. Then don't assume. Rebecca nodded. We had repeated that sentence so often it had become our rule. Helena was responsible for enough already. I did not need to assign her Lucas's hidden motives too. At 8 o'clock, I met Bell Thermal's management team. They were angry. Not at Helena personally. At the idea that the deal we had spent 8 months negotiating might have quietly become a plan to strip away the company's protections after closing. Our COO, Jennifer Park, dropped a printed red line on the table. This clause appeared 3 drafts ago. It granted Aurelian the right to reassign certain industrial patents between affiliates for integration efficiency. Our lawyers had limited it. Lucas's office restored broader wording 2 drafts later. Jennifer pointed at another provision. This one reduces your consent rights over licensing changes. I know. And this? A non-compete expansion. I know. She stared at me. Did Helena know what they were doing? I know she supported reducing dependence on me. I don't know whether she understood every change. That's not much comfort. No, our CTO, Daniel Frost, spoke next. If we had signed the latest draft, could Aurelian have boxed us out of hydrogen systems? Possibly in some adjacent markets. 7 years? Yes. He leaned back. And we were getting $800 million for the industrial division. Yes. Sounds like a lot until you calculate what we'd be giving up. That was exactly what our board had concluded. The deal had not become bad because my wife locked me outside. It had become bad gradually, across multiple drafts, while my personal relationship with Helena made everyone assume the final gaps would eventually close. That assumption had protected the transaction from scrutiny. Until one scratch on a car made me look at everything again. At 9:20, Charles Whitmore called. Aurelian's board wants you present at noon. For what? Lucas's compensation file. So you found it. We found more. What? He pitched the structure to someone. Who? Charles paused. Helena. I closed my eyes. Did she approve it? Come to the meeting. I arrived at Aurelian headquarters 15 minutes early. The building looked more like a bank than a manufacturing company. Stone. Glass. Quiet money. For years I had walked through the lobby as Helena's husband. Employees knew me. Security waved me through. That morning, the guard checked my identification twice. Not disrespect. New protocol. Everything involving me was now documented. Good. I preferred it. The boardroom door opened at noon. Helena sat halfway down the table instead of at the head. Charles had moved into the chair she normally occupied. Symbolic. Temporary. Still impossible to miss. Lucas's seat was empty. Melissa Grant, Aurelian's outside forensic counsel, began with the compensation file. She displayed the proposed 2% integration award. Helena stared at it. I never approved that. Melissa nodded. We know. Charles asked, did you see it? Yes. That surprised me. When? About 6 weeks ago. What did Mr. Dane tell you? That he wanted a performance bonus tied to successful integration. Did he disclose this amount? No. Did you review the underlying formula? No. What did you do? Helena looked embarrassed. I told him compensation committee would have to handle it after closing. Melissa opened an email. Helena had written, I'm not promising equity. If Bell closes cleanly and Marcus transitions out without disruption, I'll support a meaningful package. Send it through comp after close. Charles read the message aloud. Why was Mr. Bell transitioning out a condition? Helena looked toward me. I already knew the answer. She said it anyway. Because we were fighting constantly about authority. Charles asked, authority over what? The industrial division. Before Aurelian owned it? Yes. That answer landed badly. Helena continued quickly. I thought integration would be easier if Marcus stepped away after transition. Did he agree? No. Did you discuss it with him? No. Why not? Because I knew he would resist. Again. The same mechanism. Avoid the no. Build the structure. Make resistance expensive later. Melissa opened another email. Lucas to Helena. If Marcus stays involved after close, every integration decision becomes domestic politics. Better to get him through 12 months and then reset. Helena replied, agreed in principle. Don't put timeline in the deal docs yet. There was no way to blame that on Lucas. He proposed it. She agreed. Then she hid it from the transaction documents because she knew I would reject it. Charles leaned back. Monica, he stopped himself. Helena, were you negotiating a transaction with your husband while privately planning to remove him after closing? Yes. Did Bell Thermal know? No. Did your board know? No. Did transaction counsel know? No. Why? Because I thought it was a post-close management issue. Rebecca spoke from beside me. If management exit was part of the buyer's economic assumption, it was material to us. Helena nodded. I understand that now. Charles looked toward me. Marcus, had you known Aurelian planned to remove you within 12 months, would Bell Thermal have continued negotiations? No. No hesitation. Would price have changed? Probably. Governance? Definitely. Would the deal have happened? I don't know. That was the truth. Maybe we would have agreed on a clean sale with a defined exit. Maybe not. But I would have decided knowingly. Helena had been trying to take that choice away. Then Melissa turned to Lucas's incentive. The draft shows Mr. Dane expected significant personal compensation if Mr. Bell exited and patent control shifted to Aurelian. Helena looked at the screen. I didn't know the amount. Did you know his compensation might depend on Marcus leaving? I knew he wanted credit for integration. That is not the same question. Helena was silent. Did you know? Yes. I felt something inside me settle. Lucas had not merely been helping Helena reduce conflict. He had built a financial reason to deepen it. Every fight between us increased the value of his plan. Every time he told Helena I was being difficult, he made my eventual removal more justifiable. Every time he encouraged her to see Bell Thermal's independence as a threat, he moved himself closer to an 8-figure reward. Charles asked Helena, did Mr. Dane ever encourage personal conflict between you and Marcus? She looked at me. Yes. How? He said Marcus used money to embarrass me. I almost laughed. Charles did not. Examples? The prenup. That predates Mr. Dane. Yes. The Bell Thermal ownership. Yes. Anything else? Helena hesitated. The house. I looked at her. The house? Charles asked the same thing. What about the house? She lowered her voice. Lucas said it was ridiculous that Marcus insisted our house was jointly controlled when I paid most of the purchase price. There it was. The gate. The lockout. Not random. Not entirely Helena's idea either. That did not excuse her. But now I understood where the language came from. Actions have consequences. You need to learn. You think because you have money. Lucas had been feeding her a story where every boundary I maintained was an attempt to diminish her. Even in a house jointly titled to both of us. Charles asked, did Mr. Dane suggest disabling Marcus's access after the car incident? Helena's face changed. I looked at her. She answered slowly. Yes. My chest tightened. How? Charles asked. He said if I let Marcus come home after threatening him, it would show there were no consequences. I never threatened Lucas, I said. Helena looked toward me. I know. Did you know then? Yes. The room went silent. You knew I didn't threaten him. Yes. And you disabled my access anyway. Yes. Charles looked genuinely disturbed. This is a corporate board meeting, but I need to understand whether company personnel or systems were used in that action. Helena nodded. Lucas called my security manager. The house security manager worked for a private firm paid through our personal account. Not Aurelian. That was at least one boundary not crossed. Did Lucas have authority? Charles asked. Not formally. Then why did the manager listen? Because Lucas said he was calling for me. Were you present? Yes. So you approved it? Yes. I asked one question. Did Lucas suggest letting himself through the gate afterward? Helena looked miserable. No, that surprised me. Then why did he have access? I gave him a temporary guest code earlier that month. For what? Late-night document deliveries. I laughed once. Of course. She flinched. He had been to the house before. I know. He came because I asked him. At 11:30 after you locked me out? Yes. Why? She looked down. Because I wanted him there. That was the first time she said it without a business excuse. Not documents. Not financing. Not efficiency. She wanted him there. I nodded. That hurt. But it also clarified everything. Charles ended the personal questions. The board had enough. Then Melissa introduced the last piece. Lucas had been negotiating with an outside private equity firm called Sterling Pike. Not to buy Aurelian. To fund an employee-led acquisition of Bell Thermal assets if the main transaction failed. He had prepared a backup plan. If I cancelled the Aurelian deal, Sterling Pike would approach selected Bell Thermal executives with financing for a carve-out. Lucas expected internal defections. He had listed 3 of my senior managers as recruitable. 2 had never spoken to him. 1 had. Our head of industrial sales, Paul Weston. I felt cold. Melissa continued. We found payments. How much? I asked. $50,000. To Paul? Through a consulting entity. Rebecca immediately stood. We need the underlying records. You'll have them. Helena looked stunned. I didn't know about this. Forensics currently supports that, Melissa said. Again, separate responsibility. Lucas had been planning multiple routes to the same outcome. Get Bell Thermal technology. Remove me. Profit from the integration. And if Helena's deal failed, go around both of us. By 2:30, Aurelian terminated Lucas for cause. Not suspended. Terminated. The company referred the undisclosed compensation plan and possible kickback issues to federal authorities. Sterling Pike was notified that Aurelian considered Lucas unauthorized to negotiate on its behalf. Our Bell Thermal security team removed Paul Weston from systems access pending investigation. The $800 million deal was dead. The personal betrayal was no longer the only reason I was glad. Signing would have placed my company inside a structure where Lucas had hidden financial incentives, recruited one of my executives, and planned my removal. The scratch on the Porsche had merely caused the light to turn on. The room was already full of smoke. After the meeting, Helena followed me into the hallway. Marcus. I stopped. I'm sorry. For what now? Her eyes filled. I knew Lucas encouraged me to fight you. Yes. I didn't know why. No, but I liked that he always took my side. Yes. I liked him telling me you were the problem. I know. She stepped closer. I wanted him at the house that night. Yes. I wanted you outside. That was harder to hear. Why? Because I wanted you to feel excluded. There was no excuse after that. No misunderstanding. No security concern. Punishment. You did. Her face crumpled. I know. You wanted me to see his car inside? She hesitated. Then nodded. Yes. That answer ended something in me. Not love. Love had been dying slowly. It ended hope. She had not merely locked me out. She had staged the contrast. Her assistant inside. Her husband outside. Because she wanted me to understand where I stood. I looked at her. Then you succeeded. She started crying. Marcus, please. No, please what? I don't know. That is not my problem anymore. I walked away. Rebecca caught up with me near the elevators. You okay? No, good answer. Then she handed me her phone. A message from Bell Thermal Security. Paul Weston had admitted receiving money from a Sterling Pike intermediary. He claimed Lucas told him the Aurelian acquisition was certain and that I would be gone within a year. Paul agreed to provide internal information about which Bell Thermal managers might leave with me. The payment was called a future integration consulting retainer. Our head of sales had been paid to map defections before the deal even closed. Rebecca looked at me. Still think canceling was emotional? No, neither did the board. By evening, Bell Thermal placed Paul on leave. Federal investigators requested preservation of communications involving Lucas, Sterling Pike, and Paul. Aurelian's board opened a broader review of every project Lucas had touched. And Helena, still technically CEO, lost authority over all strategic acquisitions until that review ended. She had locked me out of my house to teach me a lesson over a scratch. Less than 48 hours later, her assistant had lost his job, her biggest acquisition had collapsed, and the board no longer trusted her to negotiate the next one alone. But the worst consequence had nothing to do with money. She wanted one night to make me feel replaceable. Instead, she gave me enough distance to see exactly who had been trying to replace me all along. Paul Weston started cooperating the next morning. Not because he suddenly developed a conscience. Because Bell Thermal's forensic team showed him the payment trail. $50,000 had moved from a Sterling Pike consulting vehicle into a company registered to his brother-in-law. 3 days later, Paul sent Lucas an internal Bell Thermal staffing chart. 7 names were highlighted. 2 engineering directors. Our head of procurement. A patent specialist. 3 regional sales executives. Beside each name, Paul had written one of 3 words. Loyal. Movable. Expensive. I stared at the document in Rebecca Sloane's office. He rated my employees? Rebecca nodded. Apparently. For what? Post-close recruitment. Post-close under Aurelian? Not necessarily. She opened another email. Lucas had written, if Helena closes Bell, great. If Marcus kills it, Sterling moves separately. Either way, we need people who know where the value actually sits. Paul replied, Marcus will lock everyone down if he senses a raid. Lucas, then he can't sense it. There it was. The same method again. Avoid my no. Create the new reality. Make resistance expensive after the fact. Rebecca scrolled lower. Paul says Lucas told him the Aurelian deal was only plan A. What was plan B? Sterling finances a carve-out. Of what? The industrial division. Without my consent? Through management defections, customer pressure, and possibly a hostile offer to minority holders if they could establish enough leverage. Bell Thermal was privately held. I owned 58%. Our employee trust and several early investors held the rest. A hostile takeover would have been difficult. Not impossible to create chaos around. Especially if key employees left and major customers began demanding continuity assurances. Lucas understood that. He did not need to buy Bell Thermal outright. He only needed to make independence look riskier than selling. I leaned back. Did Helena know any of this? Paul says no. Evidence? We haven't found any. Then keep her out of that part. Rebecca looked at me. You're being very careful about her. I'm being careful about facts. She locked you outside. I remember. She wanted Lucas inside. I remember that too. And you still don't want to blame her for what he did alone. No, why? Because I don't want to become him. Rebecca stopped. What does that mean? Lucas keeps treating desired outcomes as permission to distort whatever gets in the way. I tapped the file. I'm not going to do that just because Helena hurt me. She nodded slowly. Fair. At 10, federal investigators interviewed Paul. By noon, he had agreed to provide his communications voluntarily while his attorney negotiated his status. He admitted taking the payment. Admitted giving Lucas internal staffing information. Admitted identifying 2 major Bell Thermal customers that might pressure us into an acquisition if they believed our leadership was unstable. Then he said something that created a new problem. Lucas had not recruited him through Sterling Pike. He recruited him through Aurelian. At least that was how Paul understood it. Lucas told me Helena wanted integration planning done quietly, Paul said. Did Helena ever tell you that directly? The investigator asked. No email? No text? No meeting? No, so your belief came entirely from Mr. Dane? Yes. Why did you trust him? He was the CEO's assistant. That sentence had become poisonous. People kept acting as though proximity to Helena converted Lucas's wishes into company authority. The investigators asked another question. Did you ever verify with Mr. Bell? Paul looked embarrassed. No, why not? Because if he knew, I assumed he'd fire me. That was accurate. He had accepted money to map an internal raid. I would have removed him immediately. He knew the answer, so he avoided asking. Again. That afternoon, Bell Thermal terminated Paul for cause. No public humiliation. No company-wide email describing betrayal. HR sent the standard notice. Security collected his equipment. His equity remained governed by the shareholder plan. His cooperation with federal investigators was his problem. Mine was protecting the company. Then Aurelian's board called another emergency meeting. By now, these meetings had become almost routine. That was a bad sign. Companies should not require emergency governance every 12 hours because the CEO's assistant touched too many systems. Charles Whitmore opened with Lucas. The forensic review now showed he had inserted himself into the Bell Thermal acquisition, 3 vendor relationships, 2 executive hiring processes, the Valeris integration plan, Helena's private security coordination, and a proposed restructuring of Aurelian's strategic development group. His title was executive assistant. His actual footprint looked like a shadow COO. Charles looked directly at Helena. How did this happen? She did not answer defensively this time. I let it. Why? Because he was useful. Useful how? He reduced friction. The phrase made me think of Trevor from another life, another company, another disaster. Different people always found elegant words for the same temptation. No friction. No resistance. No one saying no. Charles asked, what did friction mean to you? People slowing decisions. Legal? Sometimes. Finance? Yes. Marcus? Her eyes moved toward me. Yes. Charles continued. And Lucas? He gave me paths around the obstacles. That should have concerned you. It didn't. Why? Because I liked the results. That answer probably cost her more than any lawyer would have advised. But it was honest. Then Melissa Grant presented the latest findings. Lucas's proposed compensation award. Sterling Pike contacts. Paul Weston payment. Recruitment lists. No evidence yet that Helena knew about Sterling's backup plan or Paul's payment. But she had given Lucas unusual authority. He could route strategic requests through her office. He could mark items CEO priority. He could speak to vendors and executives using language that strongly implied Helena's approval. He could call her private security manager. He attended transaction meetings without a defined mandate. And, most damagingly, Helena often corrected people after they challenged him. One email from the Aurelian CTO read, Lucas is requesting technical authority beyond his role. Please clarify whether he speaks for you on transaction matters. Helena replied, if Lucas says it is CEO priority, treat it that way unless I tell you otherwise. Charles read it aloud. Then looked at her. You effectively delegated your voice. Yes. To a person with undisclosed personal financial incentives. I didn't know about those. No. But what controls did you put around the authority? None. That was the answer. Melissa moved to the Bell Thermal transaction. The independent investigation concluded Helena had not created Lucas's hidden compensation plan. She had not known about Sterling Pike. She had not known about Paul's payment. But she knowingly concealed a planned 12-month transition of my operating authority from the seller. She supported expanding Aurelian's rights over Bell Thermal patents after I rejected broader language. She allowed Lucas to keep pushing terms I had explicitly refused. And she admitted her desire to reduce my independence influenced those decisions. The board recessed. Helena stayed seated. I went to a separate conference room with Rebecca. What happens now? I asked. Aurelian decides whether she can remain CEO. You think they remove her? I think public boards dislike CEOs who delegate invisible authority to assistants. That is not an answer. Rebecca smiled thinly. You trained me too well. I looked through the glass wall. Helena sat alone in the boardroom. 3 days earlier, she had been one of the most powerful executives in Denver. Now she was waiting for other people to decide how much authority she could keep. Part of me felt satisfaction. I did not like that part. Not because she did not deserve consequences. Because if I started needing her humiliation, I would never know when enough was enough. My phone buzzed. A message from Helena. Can we talk before they decide? I showed Rebecca. She can. With you present? Yes. Helena entered 5 minutes later with her attorney. She sat across from me. No makeup now. No CEO posture. Just exhaustion. I know what they're going to do. You don't. They're going to suspend me. Probably. She looked at Rebecca. Can we have 5 minutes? Rebecca answered before I could. No, Helena nodded. Fair. Then she looked back at me. I need to tell you something. I waited. Lucas didn't tell me to lock you out because of the car. That surprised me. You said he suggested consequences. He did. But disabling your access was my idea. I said nothing. He told me not to let you walk in angry and start another fight. Did you intend to lock me out before he said that? No, so he influenced it. Yes. But you chose the method. Yes. And giving him access? My choice. Yes. She swallowed. I wanted you to see him inside. I already knew. Hearing it again still hurt. Why? Because I wanted to punish you for treating him like he was beneath you. He insulted me first. I know. You knew then. Yes. So why was I the one punished? Her eyes filled. Because you were the safer person to punish. The room went quiet. Even Rebecca looked up. Helena continued. Lucas might quit. He might make a scene. He might tell me I didn't appreciate him. She stopped. I what? You always stayed. There it was. The sentence beneath years of imbalance. I stayed. So I became cheaper to hurt. She could punish me and assume the marriage would absorb it. She could give Lucas the better seat, the later meeting, the private access, the benefit of the doubt. I would still be there tomorrow. I thought you were stronger, she whispered. That is not the same as being available for damage. I know. Do you? Yes. She wiped her face. I think I kept giving the fragile person protection and the reliable person consequences. That sounds accurate. I'm sorry. I did not answer. She continued. I also knew the Bell deal would make leaving me harder. Rebecca shifted slightly. Helena's attorney looked concerned. But Helena kept going. I told myself it was about Aurelian. It wasn't only that. What else? If Aurelian owned most of Bell Thermal, then even if we divorced, you would still have to work with me. My stomach tightened. You wanted the transaction to keep me tied to you. Yes. Professionally. Yes. After the marriage ended. Yes. That's why you supported removing my independent authority. Partly. Her attorney finally interrupted. Helena, I think that is enough. She shook her head. No, then to me, I was afraid that if you could leave completely, one day you would. I looked at her. You made that easier. I know. Did Lucas know this? Yes. Did he use it? I think so. That was probably true. But again, use required something available to exploit. Helena had given him the fear. He gave it a strategy. I filed for divorce this morning, I said. Her face went blank. You what? Rebecca referred me to family council yesterday. Yesterday? Yes. So before this board meeting? Yes. You already decided? Yes. She stared at me. Because of Lucas? No, the lockout? Partly. The deal? Partly. Then what? I looked at her. Because you just admitted you wanted an 800 million transaction to make it harder for me to leave you. Her face crumpled. I loved you. I believe that. Then why does that sound like you don't? Because love is not the same as respecting someone's freedom to stay. She cried. I continued. You wanted me connected to you whether I chose the marriage or not. I was scared. I know. You never got scared? Of course. Then why didn't you do something? I did. What? I trusted the fact that you stayed. Her eyes closed. That ended the conversation. We returned to separate rooms. At 4:18 p.m., the board reconvened. Charles read the resolution. Helena was suspended as CEO effective immediately pending final determination of leadership fitness and the completion of the federal review involving Lucas. Aurelian's COO, Marianne Foster, became interim CEO. Helena retained her board seat. She retained her founder shares. She retained access to counsel and company information as a director. But she lost executive authority. No hiring. No acquisitions. No treasury decisions. No vendor approvals. No access to security systems through the company. No special instructions marked CEO priority. The vote was 8-1. Helena voted against. That was the first thing she had fought all day. Charles asked whether she wanted her objection recorded. Yes. Basis? She took a breath. I believe suspension during the Valeris crisis increases risk. Marianne answered from across the table. The greater risk is continuing with unclear authority while regulators and lenders are reviewing decisions made through your office. Helena looked toward her. A year earlier, Marianne would probably have stopped speaking. This time she did not. That was another sign the empire had changed. The motion passed. At 4:26, Helena Bell stopped being CEO of Aurelian Industrial Group. Temporarily, according to the resolution. But everyone in the room knew temporary could become permanent. At 4:40, Aurelian informed its lenders. At 4:52, the Volaris sellers invoked their right to reopen transaction economics. At 5:06, Aurelian's share price dropped another 7% in after-hours trading. At 5:30, Marianne called Rebecca. She wanted to discuss a long-term supply agreement with Bell Thermal. Not acquisition. Supply. That distinction was almost absurdly satisfying. Aurelian had spent months trying to absorb my company. Now its new interim CEO wanted to buy components under ordinary commercial terms. I agreed to negotiate. That evening, Helena called me. I almost did not answer. Then I did. They suspended me. I know. Marianne already called you. Yes. For Bell Thermal. Yes. Are you going to help her? If the agreement works for my company. She laughed bitterly. Of course. What does that mean? You can separate everything. Business from marriage? Yes. Ownership from love? Yes. Consequences from revenge? She became silent. I added, you could too. You just chose not to. She cried quietly. Then asked, are you really divorcing me? Yes. Can I change your mind? No, the word came easily now. That frightened her more than anger ever had. What if I fire Lucas? He is already fired. What if I resign from Aurelian? That is your decision. What if I sell the house? We jointly own it. Her breath caught. I did not mean that as cruelty. It was simply true. Every solution she offered still revolved around changing external structures. Job. House. Lucas. As if one more action could restore the version of me who believed she would never deliberately put me outside while choosing someone else inside. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. You don't. So that's it? Yes. She stayed silent for several seconds. Then, I'm sorry I locked you out. I waited. I'm sorry I gave Lucas access after taking yours. Her voice broke. I'm sorry I wanted you to see him inside. Another breath. I'm sorry I treated your reliability like permission to hurt you. That one was the closest she had come to naming the real problem. And I'm sorry I tried to make Bell Thermal part of Aurelian because I thought ownership could keep you from leaving. I believed every word. That did not change the answer. I accept that you mean it. She started crying harder. But? The divorce is still happening. She whispered, I know. For once, she did not try to negotiate after hearing no. The next morning, federal investigators expanded the Lucas case. Sterling Pike turned over communications showing Lucas had promised that Bell Thermal's industrial division could be separated from me within 12 months of any transaction. He also promised access to patent information he had no authority to provide. Paul Weston agreed to cooperate. And one email showed Lucas believed Helena's attachment to him would keep her from challenging his strategy until after Bell closed. He wrote, she wants Marcus punished more than she wants to read another red line. That gives us room. The sentence made me angry. Not because it was entirely true. Because enough of it was. Helena had let resentment make her careless with an $800 million deal. Lucas simply noticed. One scratched Porsche did not destroy her empire. One night outside did not either. But that night exposed the structure beneath everything. The assistant had learned that my wife would choose his comfort over my dignity. Helena had learned that I would usually absorb the insult and remain. And both of them assumed the same thing about my company. That Bell Thermal would eventually surrender because saying no would become too inconvenient. They were wrong. I cancelled the deal. The board started looking. Lucas's schemes surfaced. Helena lost executive authority. And Aurelian, for the first time in years, was learning how to function without the woman who believed every locked door still belonged to her. Helena's suspension lasted 9 days before Aurelian's board made it permanent. Those 9 days were worse for her than the initial vote. Suspension still contained possibility. A review could clear her. The board could decide Lucas had manipulated enough of the process that removing him solved the problem. Volaris could stabilize. The stock could recover. Helena could return to the 42nd floor, sit behind the desk she had occupied for 11 years, and call the entire episode an expensive governance correction. For the first few days, I think she genuinely believed that was possible. Then the final forensic report arrived. It did not accuse Helena of Lucas's fraud. That distinction mattered. Federal investigators had now confirmed that Lucas and Paul Weston were responsible for the hidden Sterling Pike arrangement. Lucas created the shell vendor structure. Lucas concealed his proposed integration bonus. Lucas paid Paul through an intermediary. Lucas promised Sterling access to assets he had no authority to control. Helena had not received the money. She had not known Paul was being paid. She had not approved the backup carve-out plan. But the board's question was no longer whether she was Lucas. It was whether she could still be trusted as CEO after knowingly giving him enough informal authority to do what he did. The report answered that in painful detail. Rebecca sent me the sections involving Bell Thermal. The first finding covered the acquisition. Helena knew our original agreement preserved my authority over patent licensing. She supported narrowing it. She knew I had rejected broader non-compete language. She allowed Lucas's office to reintroduce it in later drafts. She knew there was a private plan to transition me out within 12 months. She deliberately kept that plan outside the purchase agreement because, in her own words, I wouldn't accept it before closing. That sentence appeared 3 times in the report. Not because it was dramatic. Because it established intent. Helena did not simply fail to disclose something accidentally. She understood my likely answer and arranged the sequence so my answer would matter less later. The second finding involved Lucas. Helena had expanded his authority without defining it. An executive assistant became a strategic gatekeeper because the CEO told departments to treat his requests as her priorities. Legal challenged him. She defended him. Finance questioned vendor packets. She told them not to slow execution. The CTO asked whether Lucas could speak for her on Bell Thermal integration. She wrote, "If Lucas says it came from me, assume it did unless I tell you otherwise." That one sentence allowed half the company to stop asking whether he actually had authority. The third finding involved the House. Aurelian's board had no jurisdiction over our marriage. But Lucas had used his company role to call Helena's private security manager, identify himself as speaking for the CEO, and request that my access be disabled. The security company was privately paid. No corporate funds were involved. Still, the board considered the incident relevant because it showed Helena had blurred personal and corporate authority around Lucas. She did not merely date too close to work. She allowed him to behave as though proximity to her converted into power everywhere. The fourth finding was the one that ended any realistic path back. The investigators recovered an audio note Helena had dictated to herself 6 weeks before the charity dinner. She frequently recorded thoughts after late meetings. Most were business reminders. This one was not. Her voice came through Rebecca's laptop. "Marcus keeps rejecting the broader patent language. He says Bell Thermal has to remain independent after close. I know he's right that the LOI preserves those rights. But if we give him permanent veto power, we will never really integrate the company." A pause. Then, "Lucas says Marcus will stop fighting once the transaction is done because he won't risk destroying what we built together." Another pause. "He's probably right." The recording ended. I sat quietly. Rebecca asked, "You okay?" "Yes. You don't look okay." I'm tired of discovering she understood more than she admitted. That was the pattern. Every time Helena said she had misunderstood, another document proved she had identified the issue correctly before choosing to ignore it. She understood the patent rights. She understood my veto. She understood the deal was supposed to preserve independence. She understood I would object. And she counted on my loyalty after closing to make resistance too expensive. The board met that afternoon. I was not invited. There was no reason for me to be. Aurelian was deciding Helena's future, not mine. Charles Whitmore called me at 6:18. "We removed her. CEO? Permanently." I closed my eyes. Vote? 9-0. Even Helena had not voted against it. She abstained. She resigned as CEO before the formal vote, then the board accepted the resignation and adopted a resolution making her ineligible for reappointment for at least 5 years. Board seat? She keeps it for now. Executive authority? None. Marianne? Permanent CEO subject to shareholder ratification. I looked through my office window at the Bell Thermal production floor. Nobody down there cheered. Most employees did not even know the vote had happened yet. Life continued. That was the part Helena had never expected. Charles continued. The board also approved a revised Volaris strategy. With another thermal supplier? Partly. What does that mean? We are reducing the acquisition price and carving out 2 product lines that depended on Bell Thermal integration. So Volaris stays alive. Smaller deal. That made sense. Aurelian's empire would not collapse because I cancelled one transaction. It would shrink. Recalculate. Adapt. Real companies did that. Marianne still wants the supply contract, Charles said. Rebecca is reviewing it. We need certification capacity for the Valeris lines. Then pay market rates. He laughed. Your bedside manner remains excellent. I slept outside once. It changed me. Charles went silent for half a second. Then, I heard about that. I assumed. Helena disclosed it during the review. Why? The board asked whether Lucas had influenced other decisions involving you. I did not want details. Then Charles added, she did not blame him. That got my attention. What did she say? That locking you out was her decision. Letting him into the house was her decision. Wanting you to see him inside was her decision. I stared at the floor. Good. That's all? What do you want me to say? I don't know. Neither do I. After we hung up, I returned to the supply agreement. Bell Thermal would continue selling Aurelian components. Not patents. Not ownership. Components. 5-year supply commitment. Minimum volume. Price adjustments tied to raw material indexes. No exclusivity. No board observer rights. No integration. No marriage. Just business. Our board approved negotiations unanimously. That same evening, Helena came to my apartment. She did not enter. She texted from downstairs. I'm here. If you don't want to see me, I'll leave. That sentence alone showed how much had changed. 2 weeks earlier, she disabled my access to our house because she assumed she could decide where I slept. Now she waited outside a building she had no right to enter. I went downstairs. Helena stood beside a black SUV. No Lucas. No driver. She had driven herself. I resigned, she said. I heard. They were going to remove me anyway. Yes. I wanted one decision at the end to still be mine. I understood that. Fair. Her eyes filled. They're making Marianne permanent. She's capable. I know. That hurts? Yes. She laughed bitterly. Not because she doesn't deserve it. Then why? Because I spent years believing everyone around me was good because I made them good. That sounded exactly like Helena. And now? Now I think I hired good people and then spent years making sure they couldn't prove they were better than me at anything important. I said nothing. She looked toward the apartment building. This is where you live now? Temporarily. I hate that. I know. I hate that you have another place. That is what separation means. Her face tightened. Then relaxed. No. I know. She had come with a folder. She held it out. What is this? Security records. I opened it. Our Cherry Creek house. Gate access. Guest permissions. Administrator history. Helena had removed Lucas's guest code. Then she had removed her own unilateral administrator privilege. The security company now required either both owners' approval or an independent court order for access changes affecting either of us while divorce proceedings continued. You did this? Yes. Why? Because I shouldn't have been able to lock you out alone. No, I told them to restore your access permanently until the house is sold. I'm not moving back. I know. She swallowed. I didn't do it to make you. That mattered. The folder contained a written statement from Helena. She admitted ordering my credentials disabled. Admitted there was no safety reason. Admitted I had not threatened Lucas. Admitted she wanted to punish me and wanted me to see Lucas entering after I had been excluded. I looked at her. Your lawyer approved this? No, Helena. I know. Do not create legal admissions without counsel. She gave me a faint smile. That sounds like you. It sounds like common sense. I already sent it to my lawyer. And? She told me I was an idiot. She's probably right. But she said if I insisted, she'd preserve it as part of settlement disclosure. I closed the folder. What do you want from me? Nothing. That's not how you usually work. I know. Then why give me this? Because I spent too long changing records after the fact to make my decisions look better. She looked at the folder. I wanted one record I couldn't later rewrite. I believed her. That did not mean I wanted her back. I'll give it to Denise. Okay. Then she said, Lucas's Porsche wasn't even his. I frowned. What? The company leased it. Aurelian? Yes. He told me he bought it. He had a vehicle allowance, and he convinced procurement to structure the Porsche as an executive recruiting asset. I almost laughed. For an executive assistant? The expense is part of the audit. So I scratched a company car. Yes. And you locked me out of my house over it. Yes. She started laughing. Not because it was funny. Because the absurdity was finally too much. Then she cried at the same time. I destroyed my marriage over a car he didn't even own. No, she looked at me. You keep correcting that. Because the car was only the night you made the problem impossible to ignore. What was the problem? You thought my dignity was cheaper than upsetting him. Her laughter stopped. Yes. You thought Bell Thermal's independence was cheaper than uncertainty. Yes. And you thought I was safe enough to punish because I would stay. Her eyes filled again. Yes. That is what ended the marriage. Not Porsche paint. Not $800 million. Not even Lucas by himself. A pattern. Helena took a breath. I met with Denise's office. What? My lawyer did. For settlement? Yes. She looked at me. I'm not contesting the prenup. I didn't expect you to. I'm also not claiming Bell Thermal appreciation. That surprised me. She could have at least explored whether marital efforts contributed to certain value increases. You should follow your attorney's advice. I am. Did she recommend waiving it? She said the claim would be expensive, uncertain, and ugly. That sounds accurate. I don't want ugly. We're past that. I don't want more. That I understood. Our divorce mediation began 4 days later. The house would be sold. The mortgage was negligible. Net proceeds divided according to title. Joint investments split. Helena retained her Aurelian founder shares except for a limited marital portion of compensation-linked stock. Bell Thermal remained mine. Neither requested spousal support. Then we reached the issue of the cancelled transaction. Helena's lawyer asked whether Bell Thermal intended to seek reimbursement from Aurelian for diligence costs. Rebecca answered. Yes, to the extent provided under the LOI. How much? Approximately $1.7 million. Helena looked at me. You're charging Aurelian? It is contractual. Her mouth opened. Then closed. Old Helena would have accused me of being petty. New Helena looked toward her own lawyer. Is Bell entitled to it? Yes. Then pay it. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. I did too. The mediation continued. Afterward, Helena asked to speak privately with counsel nearby. I used to think you cared about contracts more than people. I know. I think I was wrong. What changed? Lucas ignored contracts whenever they blocked him. Yes. So did I. Sometimes. And every time, somebody else ended up carrying the risk. That was exactly right. She looked at me. When you enforced the LOI, Bell Thermal lost an $800 million sale. Yes. Why were you willing to do that? Because retaining a valuable business under our control was better than selling it under terms we no longer trusted. You chose ownership over cash. The board did. You started the review. Yes. She nodded. I think that is why Lucas never understood you. He didn't need to. He thought price was your weakness. He was wrong. He thought if he made the acquisition big enough, you'd tolerate the rest. He was wrong about that too. Helena gave a sad smile. So was I. The next morning, Aurelian announced Marianne Foster as permanent CEO. The stock rose 3%. Not because investors hated Helena. Because uncertainty ended. Then Aurelian announced the revised Volaris transaction. Purchase price reduced from $3.4 billion to $2.5 billion. 2 business lines carved out. Bell Thermal technology removed from integration assumptions. The market reacted positively. The deal could survive without my company. Again, Helena watched something she thought required her and me continue after both were removed. She called that evening. I saw the Volaris announcement. So did I. They saved it. Yes. Smaller. Yes. Still a good deal? I haven't reviewed enough to know. She laughed quietly. You could just say yes. That would be pretending. I know. Then, Marianne called me. Why? She asked whether I wanted to attend the shareholder meeting as founder. What did you say? No, why? I think I need to learn that Aurelian can have important days without me in the room. That sounded painful. Probably necessary. Then Helena told me federal investigators had contacted her again. Lucas's compensation scheme had grown. He had used the Porsche too. The vehicle lease had been approved as a recruitment benefit for a future strategy executive position that did not yet exist. The person supposedly being recruited was Lucas himself. He had used Helena's office to approve pieces of a promotion package he planned to formalize after the Bell Thermal deal closed. Salary. Vehicle. Integration bonus. Future equity. Title. President of Strategic Integration. Did you know? I asked. About the title conversation, yes. The equity? No, the Porsche. I approved an executive vehicle allowance. For him? Yes. Before he had the executive job. Yes. I almost laughed again. So he drove his future company car into my driveway while you locked me outside. Helena groaned. When you say it that way, that is literally what happened. I know. Then she said, he used me. Yes. But I used you too. I did not answer. She continued. I keep wanting his wrongdoing to make mine smaller. It doesn't. I know. That was becoming her most important sentence. The next week, Lucas was indicted on federal wire fraud and conspiracy charges related to vendor payments and the Sterling Pike arrangement. Paul Weston was not charged immediately. He entered a cooperation agreement and faced separate civil claims from Bell Thermal. Aurelian terminated the Porsche lease and recovered the vehicle. The scratch cost $2,840 to repair. I received the invoice because I had offered to pay from the beginning. I paid it personally. Rebecca stared at me when she saw the receipt. You realize Aurelian's insurance would cover this. I caused the scratch. You canceled an $800 million deal. Those are unrelated. She laughed. You are impossible. Maybe. But the distinction mattered to me. I scratched the car. I paid for the scratch. Helena locked me out. She owned that decision. Lucas committed fraud. He owned his. Bell Thermal canceled the transaction. Our board owned that decision. Aurelian removed Helena. Its board owned that. Consequences became easier to understand once everyone stopped trying to move them onto someone else. When I sent Helena a copy of the repair receipt for household accounting, she called. You paid it? Yes. Why? Because I scratched the car. She was quiet. Then she started crying. Marcus. What? You were willing to pay it that night. Yes. I know. And? I'm realizing none of this had to happen. No. It did not. That was perhaps the worst part. A 3-inch scratch needed a repair. Instead, Helena turned it into a loyalty test. Lucas turned it into leverage. And I finally looked closely enough at the $800 million deal to realize how much else they had been trying to take. Aurelian survived the cancelled transaction. Bell Thermal remained independent. Lucas faced federal court. Helena lost the CEO chair she had spent 11 years building. And our divorce moved quietly toward final judgment. All because one night, my wife decided an apology and a repair bill were not enough. She wanted obedience. What she got instead was an audit. Lucas's arraignment lasted less than 20 minutes. He pleaded not guilty. His attorney called the charges an aggressive interpretation of ordinary corporate planning. Federal prosecutors disagreed. So did the bank records. So did Paul Weston's testimony. So did the messages where Lucas discussed hiding the source of Sterling Pike payments and promised access to Bell Thermal assets he did not control. The court released him pending trial under strict conditions. No contact with Paul. No contact with Bell Thermal employees. No access to Aurelian systems. No movement of specified accounts. The Porsche was already gone. His title was gone. His office was gone. The future executive package he had been assembling around himself had become evidence. I did not attend. Neither did Helena. That surprised me more. For months, Lucas had been the person she defended first. The person she allowed into our house after locking me outside. The person whose judgment she trusted over mine because he made difficult choices feel easier. Now his attorney asked whether Helena would provide a character statement confirming that Lucas had been a trusted employee before the investigation. She declined. Not because her lawyer advised against it. Because she said she no longer knew which version of him she had actually known. That was one of the last things she told me before we stopped speaking for almost 3 weeks. The silence was good. Our divorce attorneys handled the remaining property questions. Bell Thermal and Aurelian negotiated the supply agreement through separate legal teams. Marianne Foster ran Aurelian. I ran my company. No midnight calls. No arguments about whether I would come home. No Helena asking me to wait before making a decision. For the first time in years, our lives no longer required daily negotiation. Then Denise Harper called. We have a settlement. All issues? All. House. Listed next week. Aurelian stock. Agreed allocation. Bell Thermal? Fully waived. Joint investments? Split according to schedule. Anything unusual? Denise paused. One thing. I knew immediately that meant Helena. What? She wants to transfer her interest in the Aspen property to you. I frowned. We had bought a small mountain house 6 years earlier. Compared with our other assets, it was not financially important. Emotionally, it mattered. It was where Helena and I used to disappear for weekends before Aurelian became too large for weekends. I had not visited in 2 years. Why? She says you used it more. That's not true. She says she doesn't want it. Sell it and split proceeds. That was my recommendation. And? She specifically asked whether you would take it. No, Denise sounded unsurprised. I thought so. Why is she doing this? She didn't say. I did not call Helena. That was important. Old habits made me want to solve the motive. Maybe guilt. Maybe sentiment. Maybe an attempt to leave one door open. It did not matter. I said no. The property would be sold. 2 days later, Helena emailed. I understand about Aspen. No argument. That was all. No explanation. No pressure. No second attempt. Something had changed. A week later, I understood what. Charles Whitmore invited me to lunch. Not as Helena's husband. As Bell Thermal's CEO. Aurelian's 5-year supply contract was nearly complete, and he wanted to discuss board-level relationship management. After we finished the business portion, he said, Helena asked me to stop updating her about you. I looked up. What? She used to ask how negotiations were going. That seems reasonable. She still owns a lot of Aurelian. She wasn't asking about pricing. I understood. Charles continued. Whether you seemed angry. Whether you mentioned her. Whether Bell Thermal's team thought you might reconcile. I put down my coffee. And now? Last week she told me not to tell her anything unless it affects her legal rights as a shareholder. Why? She said she was using business information to stay emotionally attached to a marriage that was ending. That was unexpectedly self-aware. Charles watched me. You want to know something strange? Probably not. She's becoming easier to talk to. I laughed. That sounds terrible. You know what I mean. I do. She listens now. That may be useful. She asked Marianne for a written list of the governance failures the board attributed directly to her. Why? Apparently she's working with an executive coach. That surprised me. Helena hated executive coaches. She once described them as people who charged CEOs to say things their spouses had already said for free. Maybe that explained why she had ignored me. Charles continued. She asked for the list without the Lucas findings. That got my attention. Why? She said she wanted to know what remained if every crime, lie, and manipulation by Lucas were removed. That was exactly the correct question. What remained? Charles counted them. Failure to define delegated authority. Ignoring counsel. Concealing material post-close intentions from Bell Thermal. Allowing personal fear to affect acquisition strategy. Using informal executive channels to bypass standard review. And treating disagreement as a loyalty problem. That last one was not strictly a governance category. It was still accurate. How did she react? She wrote them down. No argument. No, but Lucas. No, but Marcus. No, but the deal mattered. Just the list. I left lunch thinking about that. For years, Helena believed admitting fault meant surrendering authority. So she defended every decision until the defense became more damaging than the original mistake. Now she had lost the authority anyway. Maybe that gave her permission to stop protecting it. The Bell Thermal Aurelian supply contract was signed the following Monday. 5 years. Minimum purchase volumes. No exclusivity. No patent transfer. No hidden integration rights. No future acquisition option. No clause tying me to Aurelian after the marriage. Marianne signed for Aurelian. I signed for Bell Thermal. Helena had no role. Aurelian issued a press release announcing the partnership. Its stock rose 2%. Bell Thermal employees celebrated because the contract gave us stable revenue without surrendering control. The 800 million acquisition was dead. The commercial relationship was stronger. That irony would have infuriated Helena 6 months earlier. This time, she sent me a single message. Congratulations. It's a better structure. I stared at the screen. Then replied, agreed. Nothing else. The divorce mediation concluded 3 days later. Helena and I sat at opposite ends of a conference table. Our attorneys reviewed the settlement point by point. House sold after closing. Aspen property sold separately. Joint accounts divided. Personal belongings exchanged. Aurelian shares allocated. Bell Thermal fully excluded from any claim. No support. No confidentiality clause preventing either of us from discussing our own experiences, but mutual agreement not to disclose proprietary company information. Then Denise reached the final item. Access. Helena looked toward me. Every digital credential tied to shared property had already been changed. Joint cloud storage divided. House security placed under neutral management until sale. Emergency contact designations removed. Medical authorizations revoked. Power of attorney documents cancelled. It was administrative. It still felt final. Denise asked, any objection? No, I said. Helena shook her head. No, then she surprised everyone. I want to add something. Her lawyer looked wary. What? Helena looked directly at me. I want the settlement to state that Marcus did not voluntarily leave the marital residence on the night in question. Her attorney sighed. We do not need factual findings about the lockout. I know. Then why? Because for weeks I told people he chose not to come home. I felt my jaw tighten. She continued. That wasn't true. Denise looked at me. I said nothing. Helena's lawyer said, we can include a neutral acknowledgement if both parties want it, but there is no legal advantage. I don't want an advantage. Helena's voice remained steady. I want the record accurate. That phrase again. The record. She had spent years believing she could control outcomes by controlling narratives. Now she seemed almost obsessed with removing the convenient versions. The lawyers drafted one sentence. The parties acknowledge that on the evening of April 18, Mr. Bell's access to the jointly owned marital residence was disabled at Ms. Bell's direction and was not the result of Mr. Bell's voluntary departure. I read it. Then signed. Helena signed too. After mediation, she asked whether we could walk outside together. Our attorneys remained inside. The afternoon was cold. She pulled her coat tighter. I told my mother the truth. I looked at her. What had you told her before? That we had a fight and you stayed at work. That was technically true. She winced. I know. What did you tell her now? That I locked you out. And Lucas? That I let him in. How did she react? She asked whether I had lost my mind. That seems reasonable. Helena laughed weakly. She also asked if I was sleeping with him. What did you say? The truth. Which was? We kissed. I wanted more. It never became sexual. I nodded. She asked why I chose him. That's a good question. I told her because he made me feel chosen. That surprised me. You were my wife. I know. You were chosen. I didn't feel like it. Why? Because you had your own company. I stared at her. She looked ashamed even saying it aloud. You saw my independence as rejection. Yes. Even while I was married to you. Yes. She looked down. Lucas was always available. He worked for you. I know. He was paid to be available. I know. And you confused responsiveness with devotion. She nodded. Yes. Then she said, you used to tell me no and still come home. Yes. I thought the no meant you loved me less. No, I know that now. We stood in silence. Then Helena asked, do you know what my coach told me? What? That I built a life where nobody was allowed to disappoint me safely. I thought about that. Employees learned to tell her yes. Lucas learned to turn yes into power. I learned that saying no cost peace. Eventually, even our house became a place where refusal could get me locked outside. That sounds accurate. She said the problem wasn't that I demanded excellence. No, it was that I turned disagreement into punishment. Yes. Her eyes filled. I did that to you constantly. Toward the end. Longer than that. Maybe. I did not need to argue over the date. Then she asked, did you ever feel afraid of me? The question stopped me. Not physically. I know. But? I became careful. Her face changed. About what? How I raised problems. What else? When I disagreed. What else? Whether something was worth 3 days of conflict. She looked sick. I thought you were detached. I was calculating cost. That hurt her. It should have. Not because I wanted pain. Because it was true. She whispered, I made my husband manage me like a volatile client. Sometimes one sentence explains an entire marriage. That happened. I'm sorry. I nodded. Then she asked the question she had been circling for weeks. Are you happier away from me? Yes. She closed her eyes. No crying this time. Just acceptance. Thank you for answering. You asked. I used to ask questions only when I wanted a particular answer. I remember. She gave me a small smile. I'm trying something new. We separated in the parking lot. No hug. No invitation. No request that I call later. That night, I realized Helena had finally stopped asking me to come home. The next major development came from Lucas's case. Sterling Pike entered a civil settlement with Bell Thermal. The firm denied authorizing Lucas to make false representations about control of our assets, but internal messages showed one managing director had known Paul Weston was being paid for transition intelligence. That was enough. Sterling agreed to pay Bell Thermal $6.4 million, cover certain legal costs, and provide sworn certifications that it retained no confidential Bell Thermal materials. Paul forfeited the $50,000. Bell Thermal did not rehire him. He asked. Jennifer Park brought the request to me. His lawyer says cooperation helped the investigation. It did. He says he made one terrible mistake. He sold internal information. Yes. And accepted money. Yes. So no. Jennifer nodded. Thought so. Do you disagree? No, then why ask? Because I wanted to hear whether you'd make an exception. Why? She smiled faintly. Everyone used to think Helena was the one who couldn't separate loyalty from business. That was fair. Paul had worked for me for 8 years. We had traveled together. Built sales teams together. Shared ugly airport food at midnight after customer meetings. None of that erased what he did. He can rebuild somewhere else, I said. Not here. Jennifer nodded. That was the difference between consequence and revenge. I did not need Paul unemployable. I simply did not trust him inside Bell Thermal anymore. Lucas eventually changed his plea. Guilty on 2 counts. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit commercial bribery. Other charges were dismissed under the agreement. He agreed to restitution and forfeiture. Sentencing would come later. When Helena heard, she did not call me. I only knew because Marianne mentioned it during a quarterly supplier review. Helena asked whether Aurelian recovered all the vehicle expenses. I almost laughed. The Porsche? Yes. She really cares about that now? Apparently. Did they? Mostly. Marianne smiled. She said if she could redo one thing, she would have made Lucas drive a Corolla. That would have saved the marriage? No, then probably not the lesson. Marianne agreed. A month later, Helena officially resigned from Aurelian's board. That surprised investors. She still owned enough shares to remain influential. But her resignation letter said she no longer believed the founder should remain inside governance simply because leaving felt emotionally impossible. Aurelian's stock barely moved. That probably hurt. It probably helped too. The company survived another important day without her. When the news broke, I received no call. No message. No, did you see? 2 days later, a small envelope arrived at my office. Inside was my old house key. Not the electronic fob. A brass key from before we upgraded the locks. Helena had kept it on her keychain for years. There was no letter. Only a note. This opens nothing now. I thought you should decide whether to keep it. I held the key for a long time. Then put it in my desk drawer. Not because I wanted the house back. The house was under contract to another family. Not because I wanted Helena back. I did not. I kept it because the object no longer had power. Once, Helena decided whether I could enter my own home. Now the key opened nothing. And strangely, that made it easier to keep than to throw away. The divorce hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. All major disputes were resolved. Lucas was waiting for sentencing. Aurelian had a new CEO. Bell Thermal had its supply contract. The Volaris deal was moving toward closing at the reduced price. Everyone had a path forward. Even Helena. The only thing she could no longer do was choose mine for me. The divorce hearing took 12 minutes. That was all. 12 minutes to legally end a marriage that had lasted 11 years, survived 3 funding rounds, 1 IPO, 2 houses, 6 countries, and more nights in empty conference rooms than either of us could count. The judge confirmed our identities. Confirmed the settlement. Confirmed that both of us had counsel. Confirmed that neither of us was requesting support. Confirmed the property division. Then she asked the question Massachusetts required in one form or another. Do either of you believe there is a reasonable prospect of reconciliation? Helena looked at me. For 1 second, I saw the old instinct. The part of her that hated irreversible answers. The part that always wanted one more negotiation. Then she turned back to the judge. No, I answered the same. The judge signed. That was it. No dramatic speech. No courtroom collapse. No last-minute objection. Helena Bell became my ex-wife at 10:14 on a Thursday morning. Outside the courthouse, our attorneys went in opposite directions. Helena remained near the steps. I almost walked past. Then she called my name. Marcus. I stopped. She approached slowly. No touching. No attempt to block my way. I thought this would feel worse. How does it feel? Final. That's usually the point. She smiled faintly. I used to hate that about you. What? You answer the question I actually ask. I still do. I know. She looked toward the traffic. The house closed yesterday. I saw the wire. A family with 2 kids bought it. Good. The security company sent me the final account cancellation. I nodded. And? They asked who should receive the Access History Archive. What did you say? Both lawyers. Good. She took a breath. I almost asked them to delete that night. I looked at her. The lockout? Yes. Why? Because I hate knowing it exists in a record. That doesn't change what happened. I know. She looked at me. That's why I didn't. There was something different in the way Helena spoke now. She used to treat facts as material. Useful if they supported her. Adjustable if they did not. Now she seemed almost deliberately uncomfortable with herself. Maybe that was what accountability actually looked like. Not public humiliation. Not endless apology. The willingness to leave evidence intact even when it made you look bad. I'm going to California for a while, she said. Business? No, that surprised me. Then what? My mother. She okay? She's fine. I just haven't spent more than 4 consecutive days with her in 12 years. That sounds overdue. She said the same thing. Then Helena laughed. She also said I am not allowed to bring a laptop to dinner. You'll survive. We'll see. A car pulled to the curb. Before she left, she looked at me one last time. I meant what I said in mediation. Which part? That I was sorry I made staying with me expensive. I remembered. You did. I also understand now that the divorce isn't something you're doing to punish me. No, I spent months thinking if I changed enough, maybe you'd stop it. I know. That was still bargaining. Yes. She nodded. I'm trying to stop doing that too. Then she opened the car door. Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, Helena. She got in. The car disappeared into traffic. For the first time since our marriage began falling apart, I did not wonder whether she would call later. She did not. The next 6 months were quiet. Bell Thermal grew faster than expected. The 5-year Aurelian supply agreement gave us stable volume while preserving independence. We added 2 new aerospace customers. Our hydrogen systems division signed a joint development agreement with a Japanese turbine manufacturer. Jennifer Park became president. I remained CEO but stepped out of more daily operations. That decision would have terrified me a few years earlier. Bell Thermal had been the one thing I trusted because it belonged fully to me. After what happened with Helena, I could have become more controlling. Instead, I realized that ownership and control were not the same thing either. I could own the company without personally approving every expense. I could trust people without making myself blind. The difference was structure. Jennifer had authority written into her role. The board knew it. Legal knew it. Finance knew it. No invisible deputy. No unofficial voice of the CEO. No employee telling people, Marcus wants this, without a record. We built controls around trust. Not because everyone was dishonest. Because even honest organizations become dangerous when nobody knows where authority ends. Aurelian changed too. Marianne Foster completed the smaller Volaris acquisition. 2 divisions were removed. The purchase price stayed near $2.5 billion. Analysts initially called it a retreat. A year later, most called it discipline. The businesses Aurelian kept performed well. The 2 product lines that once depended on Bell thermal patents were developed through ordinary supply agreements instead. No acquisition needed. No ownership battle. No attempt to turn my company into an extension of theirs. Aurelian's share price eventually exceeded the level it had traded at before I cancelled the $800 million deal. That fact generated headlines. One business publication called the episode, "The Deal That Failed and Saved Both Companies." I hated the headline. Jennifer loved it. She printed it and taped it outside my office. I took it down. She put up another copy. Some battles were not worth fighting. Lucas's sentencing happened 11 months after the charity dinner. He received 42 months in federal prison. Not 20 years. Not life. 42 months. Restitution. Forfeiture. 3 years of supervised release. Restrictions on managing client funds after release. The judge specifically cited his cooperation after pleading guilty, but also said his conduct was not merely ambition. He had deliberately blurred delegated authority, bribed an insider, hidden financial interests, and attempted to profit from corporate transactions he had no right to control. Paul Weston avoided prison. His cooperation agreement resulted in probation, restitution, and a civil settlement with Bell Thermal. His professional reputation still collapsed. A company in Phoenix eventually hired him in a non-executive sales role. I heard about it from someone else. I was glad. That surprised me. Not glad enough to want him back. But glad that consequence did not become permanent destruction. He did something wrong. He lost the job he abused. He repaid what he could. He started again lower. That seemed proportional. Helena did not attend Lucas's sentencing. Neither did I. He had occupied too much of our lives already. The final legal update came through Rebecca. Case closed from our side. All restitution. Bell Thermal received its settlement share. Aurelian? Handled separately. Then archive it. That easy? Yes. She smiled. You used to ask for every detail. During the investigation. And now? Now he is a convicted former assistant. Rebecca closed the file. That was exactly where Lucas belonged. Past tense. Several months later, I received an invitation to a private manufacturing conference in San Francisco. The keynote speaker was Helena. I almost declined. Then I saw the topic. Founder control after failure. Curiosity won. I attended. Not because of her. At least that was what I told myself. The room held about 400 executives. Helena walked onto the stage without the polished Aurelian introduction she once would have demanded. No billionaire founder. No dramatic video. Just her name. She began with a slide showing a locked gate. No address. No house. Just a generic black gate. My stomach tightened. Then she said, "A few years ago, I locked someone out of a place he legally owned because I wanted him to learn a lesson." The room went quiet. She did not say husband. She did not say me. I was angry. He had damaged something belonging to an employee I favored. The damage was minor. Reparable. He offered to pay immediately. She paused. I did not want payment. I wanted submission. That word hit harder than I expected. Submission. Yes. That was exactly what it had been. She continued. I told myself I was enforcing consequences. In reality, I was teaching the person closest to me that disagreement with my judgment could cost him access to his own home. Another slide appeared. A simple organizational chart. One CEO. Too many lines running through one office. I ran my company the same way. No excuses. No Lucas. No claim of manipulation. I delegated authority without documenting it because I valued speed. I let people treat my preferences as policy. I allowed personal fear to influence a major acquisition. I concealed post-close intentions because I knew the seller would reject them. Then she said something that made the entire room still. The seller was my husband. There it was. No name. Still obvious to anyone who knew the old headlines. He cancelled the transaction. She smiled faintly. At the time, I believed he was punishing me. She clicked again. The slide showed, 800M deal terminated. Then underneath, supply agreement signed. A year later, our companies had a healthier relationship than they would have had if the acquisition closed. She looked across the audience. Because a vendor does not have to become property in order to be valuable. I sat motionless. The next slide contained one sentence. A no is information. Helena said, I used to hear no as resistance to overcome. Good founders are praised for that when the resistance is technical, financial, or competitive. She paused. The problem is that sometimes the resistance is another person's right. No applause. Not yet. Everyone was listening. If legal says you do not own something, no is information. If an employee says your delegated authority is unclear, no is information. If a spouse says an asset belongs separately to them, no is information. If a person you love says they are leaving, no is still information. That last sentence almost made me look away. Helena continued. You can dislike the answer without being entitled to redesign the situation until the answer stops mattering. That was the lesson. Not cars. Not assistants. Not deals. No. The word she had spent years treating as an obstacle. When the speech ended, the audience gave her a standing ovation. I stayed seated for the first few seconds. Then I stood too. Not because she was my ex-wife. Because it was a good speech. Afterward, I intended to leave. Helena found me near the hotel elevators. Her eyes widened. You came. I was invited. That sounded very Marcus. So I've been told. She smiled. Then looked nervous. That was new too. Was the gate too much? No, I didn't use anything confidential. I noticed. I debated whether to mention the marriage. Why? Because I didn't want to turn you into a prop in my redemption story. That sentence mattered. You didn't. Are you sure? Yes. She relaxed slightly. I almost emailed you beforehand. Why didn't you? Because I realized I wanted your permission for something that was mine to talk about as long as I protected your privacy. I nodded. That was probably right. And part of me wanted the email because then we'd be talking again. There was the honesty. What stopped you? I asked myself whether contacting you served the speech or served me. And? Me. I almost smiled. That coach is earning her money. She charges obscenely. Worth it. Apparently. We stood near the elevators. She looked healthier. Not happier exactly. Lighter. What are you doing now? I asked. Advising founders. I heard. Some boards too. You joined one? 2 private companies. As chair? No, I raised an eyebrow. Voluntary? She laughed. Yes. Growth. I know. She leaned against the wall. One founder asked if I wanted to be executive chair. What did you say? No, how did that feel? Like I was dying. That sounds more like you. She laughed again. Then became quiet. I wanted to tell you something. I waited. I'm dating someone. I did not expect the small tightening in my chest. Not jealousy. Memory. Okay. He's a teacher. That surprised me even more. Not an executive. No, investor. No, founder. No, does he own a Porsche? Helena stared at me. Then laughed so hard she had to cover her face. It was the first time either of us had joked about the car. When she recovered, she shook her head. He drives a 10-year-old Subaru. Safer. I told him the story. The whole thing? Enough. And he still dates you? He said he reserves judgment until he meets the gate. I laughed. Then she looked at me. Does hearing this bother you? I considered the answer. No, that was true. And the fact that it was true told me something. Whatever part of me had once measured Helena's future against mine was gone. I'm glad, I said. I think he's good for me. Then that's good. She studied my face. You're seeing someone too. It was not a question. How do you know? You have the expression. What expression? The one you used to have before work became the only thing you wanted to talk about. I shook my head. Her name is Claire. Helena nodded slowly. Serious? Getting there. She smiled. A real one. I hope it does. Thank you. No tears. No collapse. No attempt to compare. That was perhaps the strongest proof that we had actually moved on. The elevator arrived. Before stepping inside, Helena said, Marcus? Yes? I finally understand why you paid for the scratch. I smiled. That took you long enough. You damaged the car. Yes. So you paid. Yes. I locked you out. Yes. So I lost the marriage. I shook my head. Not because consequences have to match like a ledger. I know. Then what do you mean? She thought for a moment. That I spent years trying to assign everyone else's responsibility while avoiding mine. That was better. The scratch was yours. Yes. The lockout was mine. Yes. Lucas's crimes were his. Yes. The cancelled deal belonged to Bell Thermal's board. Yes. And the divorce? I looked at her. Ours. She nodded. Ours. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. Then turned. Goodbye, Marcus. Not forever. Not dramatically. Just goodbye for that day. Goodbye, Helena. The doors closed. I walked out of the hotel into the San Francisco afternoon. For years, Helena had been terrified that if I remained independent, I would eventually leave. She responded by trying to make leaving harder. A shared company. Shared authority. Shared dependence. Shared access. She believed tying more things together would secure the marriage. Instead, every forced connection weakened it. The day she finally let me leave without bargaining was the first day I believed she had actually changed. Too late for us. Not too late for her. And that was enough. 2 years after the divorce, Bell Thermal received another acquisition offer. This one was larger than Aurelian's had been. $1.35 billion. A publicly traded aerospace supplier wanted the entire company. No strange red lines. No hidden post-close plan. No executive assistant rewriting patent rights. No spouse sitting on the other side of the table. Just a real offer. Our board spent 6 weeks reviewing it. Jennifer Park wanted to sell. Daniel Frost wanted to keep operating independently. 2 early investors wanted liquidity. I was undecided. That surprised everyone. For years, Bell Thermal had been the one thing I defended absolutely. When Helena tried to fold it into Aurelian, I treated independence almost like identity. Now I had to ask a different question. Was I protecting the company because independence still created value? Or because giving it up felt too much like finally doing what Helena once wanted? That distinction mattered. So I did what we should have done with every major decision from the beginning. I separated history from economics. Outside advisors valued the company. Council reviewed governance. Management modeled the next 5 years. We compared selling with remaining private. No one asked what Helena would think. That was how I knew I was finally making my own decision. At the end of the process, I voted to sell. Not because I was tired. Not because Bell Thermal had failed. Because the offer recognized the value of what we built and preserved the technical organization under a structure I trusted. The board approved 7-1. We signed definitive agreements 3 weeks later. When the news became public, Aurelian's stock rose slightly. The market assumed the acquiring company would continue our existing supply agreement. It would. Marianne Foster called to congratulate me. Then, almost casually, she said, "Helena texted me." I laughed. About me? About the announcement. What did she say? Marianne hesitated. Do you want to know? I thought about it. 2 years earlier, I would have said yes immediately. Now I genuinely did not care enough to make it complicated. Sure. She said, good. He chose when to sell. I stayed quiet. That was all. No regret that Aurelian had once offered less. No bitterness that I had refused her and later accepted someone else. No suggestion that the sale proved she had been right. Just recognition of the part she had failed to understand before. Choice. That sounds like her now, I said. It does. The acquisition closed 4 months later. I stayed as CEO for a 12-month transition. Then Jennifer took over the division. I left Bell Thermal 21 years after founding it in a rented industrial unit with 3 employees and a furnace that tripped the breaker whenever we ran a full test cycle. On my last day, the engineering floor held a small farewell. No press. No billion-dollar graphics. Just employees. Jennifer handed me the original Bell Thermal sign from our first building. It was ugly. Blue letters on brushed aluminum. One corner bent. I loved it. You keeping this? She asked. Yes. Where? I'll figure it out. Daniel called from the back, not above another locked gate. Everyone laughed. Most of them knew the story by then. Not the private details. Just enough. The scratch. The cancelled deal. The fact that Bell Thermal remained independent because one night forced me to inspect an acquisition more carefully. I laughed too. The story did not hurt anymore. After leaving the company, I took 3 months off. Actually off. No board meetings. No investor calls. No emergency legal review. Claire and I traveled through Oregon and Northern California. We had been together almost 2 years by then. She was an architect. Calm. Independent. Completely unimpressed by wealth. The first time I told her I used to be married to a billionaire CEO, she said, "That sounds exhausting." I told her she had no idea. Claire knew the lockout story. She never used it against Helena. That mattered to me. People like simple villains. Reality was rarely that clean. Helena hurt me. Badly. She also eventually admitted it. Lucas manipulated her. He also committed crimes that belonged entirely to him. I cancelled the deal. Bell Thermal's board made that decision for valid corporate reasons. Aurelian removed Helena. Its board did that because of governance failures, not because I demanded revenge. Different actions. Different owners. Different consequences. Claire understood that. Maybe that was one reason I trusted her. One evening in Portland, she asked, "Do you think you would have stayed with Helena if the Porsche night never happened?" I thought about it. Longer. That wasn't my question. I know. She waited. Probably not forever. Why? Because the gate didn't create the problem. It revealed it. Yes. Claire nodded. Then, do you ever miss her? Parts of who we were. That sounds different. It is. Do you miss the marriage? No, she accepted that answer. No jealousy. No cross-examination. No need for me to make Helena smaller so Claire could feel secure. That was new for me too. A few months later, I asked Claire to marry me. No restaurant. No private jet. No corporate event. We were standing inside the unfinished living room of a house she had designed outside Boulder. Concrete floors. Exposed framing. Dust everywhere. I had spent half an hour complaining that one window was too narrow. She told me if I disliked it so much, I could design my own house. I said, I'd rather keep arguing about this one for the next 30 years. She stared at me. Then I pulled out the ring. Was that your proposal? Apparently. It was terrible. Is that a no? No, I froze. She smiled. No, it is not a no. Then she kissed me. I made her say yes clearly afterward. I had learned something about respecting answers. We married 6 months later. Small ceremony. 40 people. No business press. No helicopters. No merger announcement disguised as vows. Marianne attended. Jennifer attended. Charles Whitmore sent a bottle of wine. Helena did not attend. She was not invited. That was not cruelty. It was boundary. Later, I learned she had married too. The teacher. His name was Eric Lawson. Public high school history teacher. No private equity. No executive title. No Porsche. Apparently still drove the Subaru. Robert Whitmore, Charles's brother, who remained friendly with both sides of our old business circle, mentioned the wedding during lunch. I asked one question. Is she happy? He smiled. Seems to be. Good. That was all I needed. Aurelian changed under Marianne. The company became less founder-driven and more institutional. Margins improved. Debt fell. The Volaris acquisition performed better than expected. Bell Thermal's new owner renewed the Aurelian supply agreement. No crisis. No hidden terms. No dependency disguised as marriage. Years later, business school case studies would describe the failed $800 million Bell Thermal acquisition as a governance turning point for Aurelian. Some credited Marianne. Some criticized Helena. Some called my withdrawal aggressive. One article claimed the transaction collapsed because of a domestic disagreement involving a luxury vehicle. That version made me laugh. It was technically true in the least useful way possible. I once received an invitation to speak at an MBA class discussing the case. The professor asked, "What caused you to cancel the deal?" I answered, 5 bad contract revisions. He looked disappointed. That's all? No, the personal incident made me look at the 5 revisions closely. So emotion caused the decision. No, emotion caused the review. That distinction still mattered. The professor smiled. You use that phrase often. Because people confuse triggers with reasons. The class asked about Helena. I refused to discuss private details beyond what she had already made public herself. One student asked, "Did you want Aurelian to collapse?" "No, why not? They tried to take your company. Some people inside Aurelian did things I opposed. 12,000 employees did not." Another asked, "Would you have sold to Aurelian if they offered more money?" "Not under the later terms." "What if Helena hadn't been your wife?" Same answer. That was when I knew the story had finally become business history instead of marital injury. The answer no longer depended on who she had been to me. Years passed. The brass key Helena returned stayed in my desk. When Claire and I moved into the Boulder house, I found it while packing. She picked it up. "What's this?" "The old Cherry Creek key. The house Helena locked you out of?" "Yes." Claire turned it over in her hand. "Does it open anything?" "No, why keep it?" I thought about the note Helena had sent with it. "This opens nothing now. I thought you should decide whether to keep it. I used to think it reminded me never to let someone control access to my life. And now? Now I think it reminds me that locks only matter while you still want what's behind them." Claire handed it back. Very philosophical. "I'm retired." "You're 49. Emotionally retired." She laughed and put the key into a small box with old company badges and conference pins. I let her. The key had become ordinary metal. That was probably the healthiest ending possible. Then, almost 5 years after the Porsche night, I saw Helena again. Not planned. Aurelian opened a new advanced materials research center outside Denver. Bell Thermal's successor division supplied part of the equipment, and I had been invited as founder emeritus. Claire came with me. Helena was there with Eric. For one strange second, the four of us stood near the same display. Past and present. No dramatic music. No shocked crowd. Helena looked at Claire. Then at me. "Marcus." "Helena." She introduced Eric. I introduced Claire. Eric shook my hand. "I've heard about the car." Helena closed her eyes. "Oh God." Claire laughed. "So have I." For a moment, even Helena laughed. Years ago, that Porsche had represented everything broken between us. Privilege. Punishment. Jealousy. Control. Now 4 adults stood beside a thermal test rig joking about it. That did not erase what happened. It simply proved the event no longer owned any of us. Later, Helena found me alone near the terrace. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you still have the key?" I smiled. "Yes." She looked surprised. "Why?" Claire put it in a box. "That does not answer the question." "No," she waited. "Because it opens nothing." Helena smiled slowly. "I thought you might throw it away." "I almost did." "Why didn't you?" "I stopped needing to." She understood. We looked out across the new research center. Aurelian logos everywhere. Not Helena's name. Not mine. An institution continuing beyond both of us. She said, "Sometimes I think about how stupid that night was." It was. I could have just let you pay for the scratch. Yes. We could have gone home. Probably. Lucas would still have been investigated eventually. Maybe. The deal might have closed. Maybe. She looked at me. And we might have stayed married. For a while. That answer hurt her slightly. I saw it. But she accepted it. "You really think we were already broken?" "I think we had stopped treating independence as normal." She nodded. "I know." "Then, I'm glad you canceled the deal." I looked at her. That was not something I ever expected to hear. "Really?" "Yes. If it closed, I would have learned the wrong lesson." "What lesson?" "That making your no expensive enough eventually turns it into yes." "Exactly. And instead? You proved no could stay no." She looked back through the glass toward Eric. "I hated you for that for a while." "I know. Then I needed it." I did not answer. Some lessons arrive too late to save the relationship that teaches them. They can still save the person. Helena smiled. "Claire seems good." "She is. Eric is too." "I'm glad." Then she said, "I think we both ended up with people we don't need to control. That helps. We were terrible at that." "Yes." She laughed. "Still brutally efficient. Still accurate." Someone called her name from inside. She turned. Then looked back once. "Goodbye, Marcus." "Goodbye, Helena." This time, I knew the word did not carry hidden meaning. No request. No regret disguised as invitation. No unfinished negotiation. Just goodbye. Claire found me a minute later. You okay? Yes. What did she want? To ask about a key. Claire looked confused. Then remembered. Oh. She thinks it's strange I kept it. It is strange. Thank you. You're welcome. She slipped her hand into mine. We walked back inside. 5 years earlier, Helena locked me outside to teach me that actions had consequences. She was right about one thing. They did. I scratched the car. I paid for the repair. She locked me out. The marriage ended. Lucas used authority he did not own. He lost his career and went to prison. Paul sold information. He lost his place at Bell Thermal. Aurelian ignored governance. Its board rebuilt it. Bell Thermal walked away from 800 million. It later sold for far more under terms we chose. And Helena tried to make my independence impossible because she was afraid I might leave. In the end, that fear became the reason I did. But consequences were not the same as revenge. I never bankrupted Aurelian. Never sabotaged its systems. Never demanded Helena lose everything. I simply stopped allowing my company, my home, and my choices to be treated as extensions of her authority. Once I did that, the rest was not destruction. It was correction. The deal disappeared. The hidden plans surfaced. The board acted. The marriage ended. Everyone kept the consequences that actually belonged to them. And years later, when I finally understood the whole story, the 800 million was not the number that mattered. The important number was one. One locked gate. One night outside. One decision to inspect the contract instead of swallowing the humiliation. One no that I refused to turn into yes. That was all it took to change my life. Not because the gate kept me out. Because it finally showed me I no longer wanted to live behind it. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.